Hey everybody, I'm Scott Pease. I'm one half of the inventing team for Snapships.
And I'm Jeff Swente. I am, ironically, the other half of the inventing team for Snapships.
So can you guys talk about, you guys have a really interesting history in the video game industry. Can you talk a little about that history? Scott, we'll start with you and then go on to Jeff.
So I worked for Activision for, about 20 years. I helped run a studio called Neversoft, and we built some pretty big titles for Activision. We built the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, and then took over Guitar Hero from Guitar Hero 3 onwards, and finished up with a Call of Duty title.
And I was working at a mocap service provider studio as the head of production, and we did all this work for an Activision game, and they were very upset with it. And they said, "What happened?" And I calmly explained to them how mocap worked, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting. You should go talk to these guys at Neversoft. They want to start a mocap stage." And so I went and I met Scott, and I met the other people at Neversoft, and I got hired there to start a mocap stage, which is pretty cool. And then I got to work on Tony Hawk and Gun. Gun was the first game I worked on at Neversoft, which always have a fond spot in my heart. And then, Guitar Hero and Call of Duty. And I continue to work on Call of Duty. I am still working on Call of Duty. In fact, at this moment, I think I'm working on Call of Duty.
They just released another one like 3 days ago.
They sure did.
They'll never stop. They just keep making more and more and more.
Nope.
Nope, they sure won't.
That train is running 24/7.
So can you guys talk about how you decided? I mean, obviously Snapships is a lot of things. It's a toy, it's an AR augmented app, and it's also a series. Can you talk about where the idea for this concept came from? And did the name Star Fox come up at all? Because that's immediately what I thought when I saw these.
Oh, that's funny. Actually, no. I mean, the ironic thing about Snapships is it did start as a board game concept, actually. After I left making video games, I wanted to make something physical and real life and just get away from the screen for a little bit. So I started mocking up this game, and I was just using little snap cubes to put things together. And I called up my buddy Jeff, who is a 3D printing guru, and I said, "Jeff, what can we do with this? Can you make me some cool pieces?" And so I think, he started experimenting. And you want to take it from there, Jeff?
Yeah, Scott had these little, I think they're called math cubes. They're like these little plastic cubes, and he's like, "Can you make some parts that would fit, like snap into those cubes, like an engine and a gun?" And I think you also had like a bridge tower that you wanted for like a World War II battleship. And I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that." So on the weekend, I designed and modeled and then 3D printed some pieces that fit in there. And I snapped them in, and I'm like, "Oh, it's pretty cool. God, I can make a better engine." So then I made a better engine. Then I'm like, I could make more guns. I should make wings. And I just started making more things. And then Scott and I, we would meet like every week there's this really good breakfast place called CC's Cafe, which has amazing pancakes. And every week we would meet there, and we would just kind of, show each other what we were working on. And there came a point where we just started getting more and more and more pieces of this modular ship thing. And we're like, maybe we should just make the ship thing. And we never once said Star Fox. In fact, I remember I suggested the name Snapships, and Scott was like, "Ooh, it might be really easy to say some other things that rhyme with Snapships." And I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about."
No one, I never even thought about that until you just told me. I've always...
Good job, Jeff. Good job.
Go back in time and pretend I never said it.
So, like, obviously you guys have a lot of experience with technology and game development in a digital medium, but what was the challenge? Making something physical is a lot more difficult than creating a digital game or a digital space. Like, so what were some of the challenges when making these Snapships, making them come to life in real time, and so I can hold it in my hand physically,
I think one of the things was, so the fact that we have consumer 3D printing abilities is amazing. Like the fact that you can on your computer design a thing, hit a button, and a box prints it up and you can hold it is great. But there's so many small technical things that go into how well it really works. And so for me, one of the challenges was, how do we we print a thing on a home printer that has the tolerances that actually function? And so that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, like coming up with the snap system and how, like, we're talking about just microns, right? If it's off by microns, it doesn't work. And so I'm trying to get all that working. And then the whole time, never even imagining, how do these things actually get injection molded for real? Because there are limitations, like 3D printers work in a way that injection molding doesn't. And so I made all these things. I think we ended up making like 150 pieces, I think, at one point. And when we went and talked to the toy company that we ended up partnering with, they were like, oh, great. And are these modeled in a software we can send to the injection molders? And I'm like, what? No. And the way I modeled them couldn't be injection molded anyways, because I didn't know anything about injection molding. So it's funny, we started making this really leaning on the technology of 3D printing and all the awesome stuff it has to offer. But the real world of injection molding, to actually make these things in the quantities that you want to make them, is a whole different thing that we ended up learning about. And luckily, the people at the toy company that we partnered with, they knew everything about what this was and what it needed to work. And so we were very fortunate that we were able to say, like, oh, well, so you guys can take care of that stuff then. And they were like, yes, we'll take care of that stuff, which was great.
You guys talk about, like, obviously it's more than a toy. You have an AR component with your app that allows you to interact with your physical toys, as well as you have like an animated show as well, which is kind of cool. I can't tell you how many times I've seen video games. I'm like, wow, these would be really cool in a physical space and it'd be a really cool show, and they just don't do them, probably because they don't have the time or money to do it. But I feel that transmedia is a huge thing now, and we should see it a lot more, kind of like with your product.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we approached it. I mean, you know, working at Activision, you kind of are given IPs to work with, right? And then you try to make the most of those properties. And so for us, Snapships was our chance to kind of create something from the ground up, hold it, own it, and see where we could take it. So it started with the physical toy. The app we designed to basically enhance the toy, to make it more fun to play with the toy, because the app allows you to see kind of like what your ships would look like in your imagination, right? Because we can animate them, we can do engine trails and weapons and all that kind of good stuff. And the app can also really help you with playing, because it gives you building instructions for literally hundreds of ships. So you buy a few kits, you download the free app, and then you can start kind of scrolling through the app and looking for really cool ships, and then just sit there and build those. So I don't know, if you're a parent, sit your kid down with a few kits, plug them into the app, and you can be building for hours and hours and hours.
Oh, one of the things that I actually said in my review of your product was that, like, I couldn't believe how reasonable and low the price point was on these ships. Because when you look at something like, my nephews are all about Lego, and if you get a Mega Bloks, oh God, the crying and the yelling about it's not the same. But I mean, Lego, it just is so bloody expensive, and your stuff is so reasonably low. You can get like you can get like 5 different ships for like almost less than $20. I mean, that's insane. Like how low some of these price points are. How were you able to get it that low? Was that on the manufacturing side, or was that just smart engineering on your guys' side?
Well, that's a lot on the manufacturing side with the toy company PlayMonster, and I learned this really interesting thing, which is a lot of people are like, oh, well, people go to China to do work with injection molding because it's so much more affordable. But in reality, they go there because they really know what they're doing. And so PlayMonster has all of these contacts with different factories because the different factories are able to have different talents for different types of molding. And so when they saw how detailed all the Snapship stuff was, they're like, oh, well, this one factory that we work with, they'd be perfect for this. And just by going there and working with them and really planning out how all the molds work, they were able to get it priced the way that you saw it, which Scott and I are really thrilled about, because that was one of the things that when we're 3D printing this stuff, we're like, man, how are we gonna make this for something affordable? And luckily, PlayMonster was able to come in and say, we got this. And I think the affordability of the kits is great. When we were developing it, Scott and I were always like, wouldn't it be great if there was a modular toy like Lego, except it wasn't, you weren't building an abstraction of what you were building, but you were literally like each piece was its own little hero piece. And we're like, yeah, that was kind of one of the driving factors, hence all the different guns and all the different fins and all the different high detail pieces. And the fact that PlayMonster had the connections with factories and the know-how to get the manufacturing down was just really great.
I think it's super important too, because the system really shines once you have a whole bunch of kits to work with, right? Like we love the hero ships that are on the front of the box and the instructions give you ideas, but really Snapships come to life when you have a whole bunch of kits and you just start kind of building your own kind of custom creation, right? You just start kind of grooving and fitting pieces together and coming up with ships that we didn't even think of, frankly. And that's really cool. So the price point there, I think, hopefully will help people sort of slowly over time build a collection and get more and more options to open up for what they can build.
And it's 2020, and obviously we live in a world of reboots, remakes, remasters, sequels, prequels, you name it. Yours is entirely original IP. Can you talk about some of the challenges when you were designing that, or if there is any challenges when developing new IP? Obviously, people don't know about it because it's not, a Marvel thing or it's not a Lego thing, but it's your own device.
It's funny. It's funny because on one hand, it was Scott and I have worked in video games for a really long time, and the chance to the size of teams. Scott said this in a different thing recently, and it was really appropriate because when we made Guitar Hero 3, that was like 30 people, and the latest Call of Duty game I just worked on was 900.
Well, you had a team for multiplayer, a team for campaign, a team for zombies.
Oh, no, it's way beyond that. it's we have more animators working on the campaign than made Guitar Hero 3. And the chance to work in a small team, which for about 4 years was just Scott and me, it was really neat. And it's kind of funny because Scott reads a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of science fiction. I love books. We both do. And the chance to be like, oh, we're going to kind of start like a new thing. I didn't really ever think of it that way. It was just kind of like, let's just keep making pieces to make cool ships. And then we started riffing on different things that, different factions of who they could be and stuff like that. But I think for a long time, I didn't think that we really thought about it much as a new franchise. I remember I was at work one day and I had a prototype I was showing a friend, and she looked at it, and one of the things that was crazy is sometimes people don't realize they come apart. They just see the ship and they're like, oh, it's so detailed, it must be just like a model of a ship. And then I took it apart and did the stuff, and she was like, oh my God, did you guys just invent a toy franchise? And I'm like, oh shit. Oh, did we? And that was the first moment where I'm like, we may have done that. And it was very bizarre. It never even occurred to me until that moment. I'm sure, Scott, it was the exact same thing for you.
Scott has a whole empire in his mind. He knows exactly what he wants. He's almost there.
We're on step 1 of 452, but we're moving quickly through the first 10.
Can you guys talk about how the TV show came about? Was that something was that just something you're like, hey, this might be fun? You said you read a lot of science fiction, you guys both do. Is that something that you had in mind when you were starting this project, or something that's kind of evolved into that?
Honestly, I mean, we were going to be just totally thrilled if we could get a few kits out there and get them in people's hands, right? So, and what has been really cool about working with PlayMonster is that they were already thinking bigger than we were right out of the gate. I mean, just to be able to produce 10 different kits is kind of insane, coming right out of the gate. And then on top of that, they wanted to do this TV series to put together with the toys and the app to kind of give this, kind of bigger franchise experience. And so they hired Winsun Sky, which is an animation studio owned by Skybound, Robert Kirkman's company. And they're kind of the animation experts. And so they kind of ran down a path of putting out this limited series, and we contributed what we could to that. And we kind of all worked together on it. And they did a really great job. It's a cool little 35 minutes of content that's out there on YouTube, totally free. Kids can watch it and kind of hopefully get pulled into the Snapships universe.
Aside from that, how has this COVID stay at home, especially with the manufacturing, how has that affected you just this overall process of you getting your toys out and your animation out and stuff like that?
It hasn't really affected that much. The Play Monster fellow, this awesome guy named Ron Hayes, he was in China working with the factories to get a lot of the stuff finalized before COVID hit. And so they got a head start on manufacturing stuff before COVID really shut stuff down, which was great because it put us in a great position to have stuff. And then I think like the rest of the world, just getting to work like this screen, this is how everyone works now. Having a lot of meetings like that to work with the animation stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like that really hindered getting the work done a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of changes with how we all live our life now, which, you know, kids aren't in school on the playground playing with toys saying, look at this cool toy I got. So, yeah, I don't really know how much that has affected things. I know I'm getting pretty tired of looking at my desk at home.
Obviously, like Activision in general has experimented with the Toys to Life platform. Obviously, you know, Skylanders and God rest Disney Infinity. Did you guys ever consider, obviously you have the AR app, but full-blown video game in the works in the future? Thoughts, ideas?
That's a maybe. It's a maybe could happen. I mean, obviously, you know, if the line is successful, we'll see expansions and extensions, and obviously we're kind of sitting in a perfect place, I think, to help with that effort. But you know, step one is get this thing out there, get it in the hands of more kids, get more toys moving off the shelf, and then build on top of that success if we can make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we started making the app, what was really interesting about the app development stuff was just the pieces that got made are obviously based on the CAD of the toy, except art directed, and they're very pretty. Like if you spent any time with the app, the pieces look awesome. And we now have hundreds of awesome digital pieces just sitting there in the ether going, do something with us. And I'm just like, oh, that'd be great. But like Scott says, for sure, getting to the point where it's a successful thing and people are like, gosh, you know what'd be great is a video game. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So obviously where people can find your products, I mean, on Amazon, on various websites, but they can also find them, you know, if they stay safe and social distance, you can find them at Target and Best Buy, places like that. Any place that sells toys, not Toys R Us because they're gone, but any other places.
There's like two Toys R Us.
There's a couple Toys R Us's left, actually.
One in New York, and I don't know where the other one is.
Houston.
Okay.
They actually have awesome displays for Snapships. We saw some photos of the things. They have these rad display cases with the ships all built. So if you're in New York or Houston, or if you've always wanted to go, hop in your car and just make the journey, or go to Amazon and buy all the kits. That's probably
or your local Target.
Or your local Target, yeah.
You know, you guys both worked on video games. Obviously, it's something digital, but this is something physical you've made. Like, do you feel any differently that it was something you can actually hold in your hand and say, like, I made this or I helped create this? Yeah. Does it feel different than when you make a Call of Duty or a Rock Band game?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, making a video game is such a mammoth effort. Like, it's crazy how difficult making a AAA game, making any game is. It's just a monstrous effort. And by the time you're done, so many unheard of people have touched it and done stuff that just getting it done is such a mammoth victory. And making this thing, it's still a lot of people, but there's something different where you can hold the thing in your hand. And I remember when we were in a Target. Yeah! We were in a Target and we saw, oh my gosh! And my wife and I, we saw the kits on a shelf for the first time. And like, it's weird when you go to the PlayStation store and you download a thing, you're like, yeah, that's how the internet works. But there's something about being in a store and seeing the physical things in a box that really, I don't know, for me, really, it was really exciting because we're all spring chickens, and I just remember being a kid and like Christmas time, we didn't have Facebook and we didn't have all that stuff, and getting like the toys around the Christmas tree was just so exciting. And so getting the boxes at home and like ripping them open was really, really cool.
The other thing that's really cool too is we've made a lot of games with some user generated content in them. But again, that stuff is just all sort of digital. It lives on the TV. Seeing what people are doing with our actual physical kits on Instagram, Reddit, Discord, all those kinds of communities is super awesome. Like, people are being just incredibly creative. They're building vehicles and ships and all kinds of stuff that's kind of even beyond what, you know, we thought would even be possible with the piece set that we put out there. But it's really cool. I love, every day I go online just to check out what are the new builds, what are the cool things people are doing, and you know, we're trying to highlight a lot of that because it's really cool to see. It's really gratifying to see people having fun with the thing that you created.
What's the biggest Snapship you've ever built personally?
You still have it?
No, I have this one that we did for a video.
That's pretty big.
That's pretty big. I'm not gonna lie, but I had a bigger one.
Your double Gladius was twice as long as that, right?
It was much longer, but alas, I had to destroy it so I could make these other ships for videos. Yeah, what's crazy is, so when we first started making Snapships, I had it in my head because I'm stupid. Wouldn't it be great if they were all magnetic? And so we made all the cubes were magnets. And I know you're making that face.
I could see it. I could definitely. I mean, I've handled them. I could totally see it working.
Absolutely, except they don't because they're so heavy that you could make a ship with a really small ship, and it was like okay, but you couldn't play with it. It would like come apart. And we did like the cost analysis of like all those magnets, and it was insane. And so the solution we ended up getting to with the way the Snapships work, the fact that you can like actually build a thing that's like this long out of hundreds of cubes, and it can actually like hold together and you can actually play with it. The fact that you can actually build these things and actually play with them like toys, because I love Lego, but you're not gonna play with the Batman tumbler like
no. Building the Lego is the fun, right?
It's a model, right?
That's it.
So the fact that you can put the thing together, it stays together, and you can play with it is pretty awesome. It's very exciting.
I think it's great too that you're targeting like I have nephews that are 8 and 11, and it's really difficult. Like that age, there's not much stuff for them. You know what I mean? Like they're not allowed to play Call of Duty. I mean, there's Fortnite, but like, and then as we talked about Legos, like they're not allowed to touch any set that's over $50. So it's just like, you know, and these things I think are good fits for them. You hit that age range where there's not a lot of people targeting that age range. And I don't know if that's just because they're targeting people like me, the millennials, or what, but I just know that it's a really good age grade, and my friends' kids really, really like them. I mean, we mentioned it before the interview, you know, because it's something for them at that age range. Everything's either too old or too young. You know, where's the in between? Where's the 7 to 12? You know what I mean? Like that range. Everyone just seems to forget about those poor kids.
It's the sweet spot for building too, right? Like a lot of those kids are coming, you know, if they are on digital, they're on Minecraft, right? And so like giving them a system with kind of a little bit bigger, chunkier blocks that you can like quickly put together and build something that actually looks cool and looks like a spaceship, you know, without having to assemble 60,000 bricks and follow, you know, in some kind of crazy creation. And, you know, I think it's like, we kind of tapped into, I think, some of the feelings we had as kids, like the toys we wanted to play with when we were kids. Like I always wanted the super awesome Macross looking, super expensive toys, but of course those toys were fragile and were only one thing, right? So that's kind of where I think a lot of the Snapships desire came from, was to build something that would be totally modular and hold up to play and be super detailed and hopefully fire up the imaginations of kids.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because we spent like a year or two going to maker fairs around the country with the prototypes. And I think in our brains, when we first started, like I know for me, I was always like, man, we're gonna make like a thing, it's gonna be super detailed, really cool, and like coworkers in video game companies will want them on their desk. And it's like, yeah. And then we started going to maker fairs, and we were just swamped by kids, you know, 7 to 10-year-old kids. And then like a 14-year-old kid and a 16-year-old kid. And it's like, okay, but like so many 7 and 10-year-olds. And there was a point where you do have to say, you're like, oh, younger kids do like this. Because in my brain, I thought it would be different, to be honest. But
You never know until you get out there and you start showing your prototypes and seeing how people interact with them, right? That's the whole point.
yeah, totally. We would have kids at Maker Faire make a thing. And it didn't matter if it was good or bad, right? Because they made it. And therefore, they're like, oh, this is great because I made it. And my wife came with us to the San Francisco Maker Faire. And there's this one like 8-year-old girl that would make, she'd spend like 2 hours making a ship. And then she'd go to my wife and hand it to her and say, hide this so that kids can't take it apart because I'll be back tomorrow. And it's just like, well, kids are going to take it apart because you don't have all the pieces, but I appreciate the sentiment. And it was that sort of thing that made me kind of say like, oh, this might be a thing that actually could work.
Yeah, so where can they find more information about Snapships in general? Do you guys have a website? And
Yeah, so go to snapships.com, go to Amazon or Target or Walmart.com if you want to order ships. We're on all the social medias, really easy, Snapships, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And the app is 100% free. It's on the Google Play Store and the Apple iOS Store. No ads, no purchasing, no nothing. It's a great way to just, even if you want to just learn more about Snapships and what they are and what's available, just grab the app, start checking it out, and get a few ships and build something cool.